All right. Hello, Andre. Let me get you in. There we go. Well, happy Friday, people. It is a great Friday to be in domains, as usual, because it is $5 Friday. Andre, what's going on over there in your neck of the woods?
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So happy 2026, everyone. First of all, because we haven't seen heard each other in a while. The year started pretty good here, and that it's finally our first truly snowy winter in quite a while. And so, I guess I'm just happy that I get to use the mini snowblower I bought 5 years ago. So I'm grateful I don't have to pay renewal on those. It's always a good thing. So my kid is excited. Snow everywhere. Looks good, makes me excited about the year. Business speaking, I'm kind of bracing myself for volatility. 2025 to me has been a year of record breaking domain sales volume. I've sold in the 3,000 domain zone over the year 2025, but I also had lower prices than usual. And right now, people can check out datdomains.com, which is the site where I sell domains. Prices have never been lower. So the story for 2025 has been higher than ever volume, lower than ever average prices. And personally, I'm kind of getting ready for 2026 that's going to be somewhat similar. But we're gonna see.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. Well, ideally, you want to thread the needle between high prices and high volume, but they come with a give and take there. Um, anyways, we have the privilege of speaking with Louis Pickthall today, who just came up on stage.
Yo,
Louis is, hey, Louis, how's it going, man?
I'm good. I didn't
Hey.
know. I put my jumper on and everything because I thought the camera was going on, but there's no camera, so lucky me.
Yep, you can go back to your PJs or shirtless, whatever you prefer.
Thanks.
You could take a stroll outside. We're very casual here. No need to dox yourself and get all up worked up here. So yeah, well, we're glad to have you. Louis here was senior broker at Uniregistry, worked alongside Frank Schilling for many years, and he's also a co-founder at Brandforce, which is one of the premier premium.com portfolios in the world. And he does a lot of domain selling, especially at the high end. And so he's got a lot of wisdom that we can unpack today. And we're excited to get into that. So,
Thank
Louis, you wanna just kick us off and give us a tour of your experience and how you got into domains and then your journey.
Sure. It's actually been a while since I've done one of these, so there's a lot of people who maybe have entered the space in the last 4 or 5 years, or maybe didn't know. I do stay a little bit under the radar, and I don't announce a lot of things. We do that on purpose. So in 2015, I magically entered the Cayman Islands as a trader. Actually, I wasn't even in domains, and I met Frank Schilling with the Uniregistry vice president of sales, and I don't know, we just hit it off. Everybody got along well, so they put me on kind of a bit of a domain name crash course from 2015 onwards, and then I started selling Frank's names. So I was selling the Uniregistry in-house portfolio with some of the other guys who now it's quite interesting because a lot of the guys in Uniregistry that were very talented have gone so far on their own in their own businesses or at GoDaddy at a corporate level. And it's nice to see the original team do so well in other areas. That part I've really enjoyed. So we kind of grew Uniregistry, and then, as most people know, we sold out to GoDaddy for 200 million in 2019, 2020. And then I was at a crossroads. It was either you stay. I think I was either going to stay with Frank, or I was either going to go on my own and do my own thing. And I, an opportunity was presented to me by Dan.com to go and head up their brokerage. And I considered it. I actually accepted at one point, and then some legends in the industry just called me and were like, Louis, what are you doing? It's just the same thing over again. It's time to go on your own. And I was convinced that that might be the right answer, but I was very young. I was 20, 26, 27. So then I teamed up with my partner on Brandforce, and we started Brandforce. And in those days, there wasn't many kind of boutique brokerages. It was kind of a very rare thing, and it flourished. I mean, we did a year in stealth mode, just kind of building and developing, and then absolutely ran out. And we announced some sales at first because obviously we did need to grow. But then as soon as it was growing, we just concentrated on relationships, inventory, building value, and working on some of the best names available. And 6 years later, we've done that, and we've I like to think we've done very well at it, and it's been a very unique journey. And what I would say about the high-end stuff is every single deal is different. Every valuation is unique. Every pitch is unique. Every end user is very different in the way that they need to understand things. And it's not as simple as what my job used to be in the old Uniregistry brokerage days. So that's where we are. I hope I explained it well enough.
Yeah, that's a great overview there.
Thank you.
And you've been all over. I think a lot of people, myself included, especially if you're new in the industry, you hear about Uniregistry and Frank Schilling as like this mystical character, this legend who's disappeared into obscurity now, and people don't really understand. I'm curious, if you could break down like what was it like at Uniregistry in the early days, and then as the company matured, what was the secret sauce there, and how did you personally contribute to the magic that happened there?
Sure. So I actually would say I didn't even get there in the early days. I got there in like the mid days. So domain name sales as a platform, which is probably the OG of domain brokerages, was there going live around 2012. And at this point, like premium domains were super early. Like nobody really knew what was going to happen. Everybody didn't have a clue where things were going to go. I don't know whether people here know, but Frank fell into domains himself. Frank bought a construction name in Canada, or he bought a few construction names in Canada, and a construction company called him. And this is like early 2000s. And then a construction company called him and said, "Oh, we want to buy this name. We'll give you $10,000. And we want to buy these names." So he sent them all the three names, and then they sent $30,000. And he wrote back to them and was like, "Oh, you sent too much money." And they went, "Oh no, we're willing to pay 10K per name." That's how he actually fell into domain names. This is before my time. These are all stories that he's taught me over the years. But that is how he fell into it. And then that grew. And then obviously when he made some significant sales and started registering and buying 300,000 domain names at one time for name admin, he moved to the Cayman Islands, and that was where it all started. So that was before my time. And then I came when the brokerage was already kind of growing, and then we grew it together. So the way I would describe Frank is an eccentric visionary who is a bit like Elon in his ways, where he thinks beyond the realms of normality. And he still does that now, if I'm honest with you. He is a true visionary that he just thinks anything can be achieved and anything can be built. And in them days, it was at no matter the cost. Times have changed now. I think we're all a bit more careful. But at those days, yeah, he was just relentless, wanted to create the best platform. I mean, we spent so much on back end, front end. I think, in my biased opinion, we still had the best product. Personally, I think we did anyway. And most of it was down to his obsession with having that product and having the best access and having the best utility for managing domain names. And he'd log in his platform every day and look at offers, and if it wasn't clean and clear and easy to navigate as a marketplace, it just had to be better. So he was the one who put all the money into that to try and build it, and he did build it. And then all the partners came along with him because it works, right? And that's why I kind of think he is very similar in that way of a visionary. Like if you build product and think product, the money comes later. So that's kind of how Uniregistry went. But then what would happen in, I would say, 2016 onwards is we opened a second division in Manchester, which was because we were getting so many leads for his portfolio and partners' portfolios at those times. There wasn't a few marketplaces. It wasn't split across, and GoDaddy wasn't as big as it is now, although it's still very big. What would happen there would be that there was so many leads that we were hiring so many brokers, and you basically had a steam train of cognition, like just rolling through leads and leads and leads, trying to make sales for partners and for Frank himself. So it split up to a team. So there became a partner team, which still obviously, very good because there were some partners there, like some of the Brandforce names now were at Uniregistry. I mean, they're very, very high-end names. And then there was Frank's names, which kind of paid for the overheads of the company. So you were kind of trying to build the company, but run the company, pay for the company. And it was kind of like a team effort there where you'd build this unique, I would call it the most unique domain brokerage that I've ever seen. Because now we all have a runway of what we want to achieve. And I know people's runways are different, but everybody's aiming for the same goal. Whereas in them days, that brokerage was started for an investor, by an investor, for an investor, and shared with other investors. That doesn't happen so much now. If you look at the space, it's very different. Things are obviously for profit as they were, but they're not. I mean, there's some good products out there, but I just don't think there's as much obsession as there was with Uniregistry. But again, my opinion there is biased. So then,
Yeah, I'm curious what you think, like in terms of the product, like what really put it head and shoulders above everything else.
well, it's funny, like the CRM was one, in my opinion, the CRM was not really shared publicly, but in that time, it was way ahead of its league. And the problem with mass domain brokering in terms of leads, so let's say you get, actually, do you know what? I don't know the stats. I think on a good day, you could get around 1,000 leads based on X amount of name service. The problem with
And the CRM is user facing, like every domainer would have access to a CRM
Well, they would,
built
but
into the
obviously we had
registrar.
brokers, right? So you'd log in as a domainer, you'd see that you had leads. A bit
Yeah.
like, to be honest with you, they did take some parts of it. If you log into Afternic now, you can see when the cogs are turning on your portfolio, and you can see that an agent is doing some work. You just can't see what they're doing. Very similar in that
Yeah.
way. But then the agents would be really. So what you see in Afternic now, we had 10 years ago, just to put that into perspective. And did you see how long it took Afternic to release that kind of stellar software and that stellar interface, that UX? Like it took them a long time to get that right. And we got that right immediately. And the reason that needs to be right is, and the punchline here is, when you get domain inquiries on a bulk portfolio of like 300,000 names, you have to understand that 85% are likely not qualified buyers. So you can't just use a HubSpot or a Salesforce CRM, in my opinion, to maximize your quality, because it's a very unique product where you're half customer service filtering through quality, but then you're half premium brokerage trying to focus on quality. So you need a quick, easy, time efficient way to remove bad leads and to put them into automations. And then you need a very focused time to work and find the leads that are the gold. So that's why custom CRMs are so important in the domain space. It's a very unique product in that respect.
Yeah, it's easy to take for granted, just how mature a lot of the marketplaces and registrars are now. But someone had to go through the slog of figuring out, okay, what are the needs? How do we fix those? And how do we build that in an efficient way?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Uniregistry has just left their imprint on everyone. Dan, GoDaddy, Cito, and Dynadot, and the rest. So
sorry, carry on. I wanted to add that I tell you who was very good at product in terms of knowing what a broker needed. Jeff Gabriel was very, very good at knowing that, and he helped make that possible at Uniregistry. I mean, you have to take your hat off there. He building a CRM and knowing what it needed. He was very, very proficient in getting that right. That was one of his talents. That from what we see now, you might not see that, but that is a very strong talent of his that doesn't really get shared in public. Not because it's a secret, it's just not something that people focus on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting that CRMs out of the box aren't perfect enough for, domain brokerage. I'm curious if you can share, what CRMs you use now, or what other
Yeah.
lead enrichment tools you might use to qualify a lead, and what your tool stack looks like right now, if you're willing to share.
Yeah, no, that's fine. They are getting better. So obviously, like 10 years ago, you had no chance. 5 years ago, I was very heavy on closed CRM. I don't want to quote this, but I think Jeff still uses closed CRM. And so do other people, by the way. Close is pretty good because their customization is quite strong. And what closed CRM were very good at they were very good at being able to filter out bad quality, so to speak. So because of that, you could eradicate leads very quickly with clicks and ticks. Which in the domain space was 5 years ago, that was a difficult thing to do quickly. Now, obviously, all the CRMs have played catch up. There are some new CRMs now that I think are maybe even better than my own. So when I did close for a few years, and that went very well. But what I missed was the UX experience from Uniregistry and how clean it was and how personal it was. So then what I did was I built my own CRM to copy the Uniregistries as much as possible without getting in trouble for certain reasons. And I did it through a Salesforce engine. And that started around 5 years ago. And I think it took 18 months to finish. And we still tweak it today. I still use that today. And it's a shame I can't share a screen actually, because I would love to show you that. A lot of work went into that and a lot of development went into it. I think we were 6 figures into a CRM at one point, even using an engine and building our own. So to get it perfect, it does take time. But when you want to have quality data and utilize that data and be able to see it as efficiently as possible, or to show data to an investor or anyone who needs to see the offers that come in, etc., etc., it does need to appear in an efficient manner, and you do need to have the quality there. That is the problem with ready to use CRMs. They're not so good at being linked to that because the domain space is so unique. And to give you an example of that, there's 2 strategic data points that you have to focus on. There's domain data, which is a name. And then in my opinion, we have buyers, offers, country codes, time zones, and all those metrics to filter those buyers, even lead quality. So I have a buyer score out of 10 based on certain metrics like area codes, countries, towns, their email address, whether they're on Gmail, company emails, and then we rank that score out of 10. That's a very cool trick that we have. And what you do is you then have an effective spreadsheet in your domain data where you can filter through offer, buyer score, location. So, imagine if you're trying to dig for a buyer and find, let's say you get an offer somewhere and you want to try and find them internally, and you've got a couple of metrics that you can help to try and find that person, to be able to filter through your whole domain data and not manually search through them. That is not something that is so easily done for a bog standalone CRM in a hat, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then for lead enrichment, when you're looking at a particular company, once you can zero in on the company that the lead is from,
Yeah.
what do you use there, and what are the kind of tells that you look for in that company to help guide your negotiation?
So I'm not on the platform yet, but I believe Atom are quite good at looking at prospect qualities. I still do a lot of this manually, but the reason I do it manually is there's data points in lead enrichment and looking at buyer profiles that no one place has all the data metrics yet. So everybody now uses Crunchbase. People look at PitchBook. There's also some other ones. My issue with all of them is that they don't all store the same data. So that is not something that is heavily automated yet. Plus, when you get into software and you get into building these CRMs, it takes a lot of power, money, and APIs to and get it right. And that part I still like to do manually, so I know that the data I'm looking at is qualified and it's true. You know, we all see raises, we all see certain data points that we want to look at, but if that was brought in from a place where I don't think that the data is accurate, I don't want fake news, so to speak, in my CRM. So that bit's done manually. One thing I have started to use a lot that I really like is I now have some widgets next to bio details to see whether they're on an iPhone or whether they're on WhatsApp, and you know, their email and IP address, all the basic things that people use. But if you save clicks, in my opinion, on CRMs, you become more efficient. So whereas if you wanted to see whether the bio was on an iMessage or on WhatsApp, the click and the time it takes to go through that and do that is actually quite time consuming when you look at a few different points. Whereas when you get your API to tell you already whether this buyer is on WhatsApp, iMessage, company emails, that can automatically go into a lead score. So that's been very useful that I've done from scratch. And I've been mastering that, in my opinion, for 10 years, because the main part of, or the time consuming part of my job is judging the quality of leads before I, you know, make 100 phone calls a day. I've done that, been there, done that. I don't really want to do that anymore. I'd rather make 15 or 10 quality calls a day, planned, organized, and be useful in the right space.
Yeah, and especially if the quality that you're working with, you know,
Yeah.
you can afford to take the time to dedicate to each lead and make sure you're massaging it just perfectly.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you know, once you've collected that data, you know, what does the decision tree look like? What are the possible routes you might go down, and various negotiation tactics you might use, or discussion topics you might kick off with the
Yeah.
potential buyer, given the research that you have in your hand?
I depends who you're speaking to. I mean, you can be a complete creep and call them out on every data point you've ever seen, and then they're like, "Wow." There's two sides to that. You either look
I'm
really
sure that
creepy,
goes over very well.
yeah, you look really creepy, but you look like you know what you're doing and you're very research orientated, and they start to be more honest with you. There's no right or wrong answer, or you could be a bit reserved, a bit calculated, wait for certain objections and use certain data points based on the objection that comes to you. That one is probably more recommendable. The approach varies based on the end user. If you've got a very sharp, straight to the point, no bullshit buyer, then you can kind of respond in the same manner. If you've got a very calculated, reserved, private, withholding information prospect, then you kind of have to treat that guy with some politeness and manners, and play to his tune. That would be my sales advice in that kind of respect. But research is everything. I mean, when you do go on that higher end, you really can hone in on your skills if you can spend more time on learning who you're speaking to. So for the more information you can read and analyze before you enter that phone call, it's not trying to predict what happens and what gets said. It's just having the answers ready and the information in your vortex for when that person gives you an objection or you need to educate them. Because if you're not ready for that, and it's hard to, especially if you're dealing with CEOs and there's funding around and there's multiple decision makers. One thing I would say to people who are trying to broker at these levels is you can only do so much via email. That's still true to this day. And you don't get many opportunities to really add value in the room or on a call. And you really, really have to make the most out of that. Because if you think about a 6, 7, or 8-figure transaction, the email time is X, but the actual talk time and the time you get to put your value forward is so small. So you really have to make sure that it's as effective as possible. And that goes down to being educated and being very good at your research.
Now that you mention it, I'd like to chime in with a question because I get contacted like fairly frequently by beginners, so people who are just starting out. And, when you're a beginner, you say, oh, I'm just going to do outreach. It's going to be so simple. But, I have like a pretty large portfolio, so I don't do outreach myself. My question to you, and I think a lot of people are going to find this interesting, is if you would be starting, let's say now in 2026, as a domain investor who doesn't have a lot of money at his disposal, maybe you have a couple $1,000s and you want to get started. would you acquire your own cheap inventory and try to do outbound calls and stuff like that to move your inventory and then upgrade to better names? Or would you broker for other people who have to build your bankroll so that you can build your inventory that way, for example?
A good question. In my experience, every human has extended emotions over their own asset. I am a better broker than I am an investor, and most of the killer investors I know are better investors than they are brokers, especially when it comes to trading on your own asset. So more reason for brokerages, more reason for marketplaces, more reason for not honing in on your domain so much. What I have experienced is that buyers can piss off, sorry, excuse my French, they can annoy owners very easily by their choice of words and their choice of communication. It's impossible to annoy me. I'm relentless. Like nothing will ever offend me, ever. And because of that, I think I'm very good at being a negotiator with zero emotion at the table. So in terms of outreach, I think if you can be relentless and do the outreach and not care about the response, but just realize it's a numbers game until you hit quality, then it doesn't matter. But most investors, in my opinion, although I've got that skill, they don't utilize that as much. They're very, very good at putting their skill into acquiring, but outreach is a different emotional regulation. Very different. So that's my answer to that question. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got, you talk about being able to code switch basically and change gears depending on what the mood of the buyer is. It's like very natural for, I think, a lot of social butterflies to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the hermit domain investor who may be less socially oriented and is probably more numbers or systems oriented, then I'm sure it doesn't come nearly as easily. Andre, you got something?
I was just
me. Sorry, I was about to add that the skill set change also is, if you, let's say you use three-letter.coms as an example. If you're good at acquiring three-letter.coms, in my opinion, the skill sets are very different. You're very good at letters and research and quality points to make a decision to buy or trade on that asset. If you come to sell that asset, the skill set involved in acquiring the asset respectfully doesn't help you sell it. So what you have to do is either be good at selling or good at investing. To be good at both is very rare. There's probably only 5 people I know in my hand who are very good at both in this industry. And I won't go into details, but what I would say is that when you sell that three-letter.com to an end user, what you have to say to build value and do what you need to do to get through there is very different than what it took you to acquire the asset. And what the information you use to acquire the asset, if you were to use that information to sell it, most of the time it doesn't build value, especially in like the high end or the three-letter.com space. It doesn't really convince a buyer to buy something because it's not linked to their user case or what they want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I was raising my hand because I totally identified with the hermit stuff. Like I literally live on a farm on a hill far, far away. So I can definitely relate to that. And also I would say that probably most people I talk to in the domain space are kind of more so hermits than people who are good at socializing and whatnot. So let's go with that. Let's say you're a domain investor, you're a bit of a hermit, but you like kind of digging into the data, going through lists, choosing the best domains. And we're going to say that your domain selection game is like spot on. What would you recommend for the people in question? Should they try to just do outreach anyway, even if, for example, many of them have language barrier issues, they have difficulties getting on the phone because their pronunciation kind of sucks maybe, or stuff like that? Or would you recommend just foregoing the outreach altogether and just trying to make their portfolio economics work in another manner, let's say?
Sorry, the back end of that question, can you just repeat? I missed the latter part.
Yeah, the bottom line is, like, if you're a person who's data oriented and you're good at acquiring inventory, would you recommend to these people that they try to do outreach anyway, because, as a way to kind of move things along with sales? Or would you say, no, it's too much of a skill difference, it's too difficult of a skill set to acquire, just focus on inbound inquiries, just focus on kind of making your portfolio economics work in another way?
So if you were selling a 2-word brandable for like 20K, 10K, 5K, even up to like 30K, I think it's worth always speaking to whoever you can and doing the most possible to push that to the right user. Because I also have a generalization that if you go for a 2-word brandable, there's less end users than if you were to go for a 1-word.com or a 3-letter.com. A lot of the time, that's the case. So if there's a select target or targets where you think there's end users and the price scale is low, you're just kind of planting the seed and trying to get them to buy or be interested based on that asset. And it's not a big deal in terms of the larger domains that sell. Now, if you've got a 3letter.com and there's only 2 or 3 end users and it's a 6-figure acquisition, and how do I put this politely? And there's only so much opportunity there. I think you need to be really careful about who you pitch to, how you pitch to, and how many times they're contacted. Because ultimately, if 5 different people contact one end user for the same domain name, different price points within a certain time frame, you actually degrade your domain name and you lower the value. So I think targeted and selectful targeting is very important depending on the asset. And I wouldn't burn your bridges and try to plant the seed too early or at too many price points or too many time points, because if you go and reach the same guy 4 or 5 times on the same domain name and he keeps saying no, it doesn't put you in a great negotiation position. And I would look at it like that. And if you think you've got an asset and you think it needs to go into a certain pair of hands and you think a certain person can build value, that's why a lot of the guys do well in the brokering space who are very good at the high-end job, because what they do is they deliver that message with better quality and better conviction and maybe build more value than the certain skill sets that are involved in the people who acquired them. I hope that's a fair answer. Not always, by the way. There's some people who can do both, but I just generalizing based on my experience.
And what amount of outbound do you guys do at Brandforce currently?
I would say that I don't want to go into certain specifics, but we do roughly 20 to 30% outbound success and 60, 70% inbound success.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a considerable mix.
Yeah.
And obviously for you guys, having that high-end inventory, you need to be extra careful. You can be certain that there's really far fewer leads that actually make sense at your price points. And so you have to be extra careful with each of those leads.
One of the things I'm proud at, since I think we're into year 6 now at Brandforce, we've never had one UDRP since I started, which I'm very proud of, actually. And that was due to my training from, firstly, John Berryhill, but secondly, Paul Keating, who's our in-house counsel. And I'm very, very, very well educated and careful in that process. Obviously, you have to be working on that inventory. But yeah, it's a certain skill set, and I'm happy we got it right.
Yeah, that's important. We hear a couple scattered reports of those every now and then. Care to share your tips there for staying out of trouble?
I think the words you use and the approach you take is certainly very careful. It's hard to do that without going into specifics, but I tend to stay away from the obvious reasons that would get you in a UDRP. I also tend to stay away from being too pushy. I also tend to stay away from making accusations or not personal, but comments that can bite you back in a certain way based on the way you said them, and things that can be, if you start to learn how to speak in legal language, you can prevent the way you communicate that could be twisted against you and worked against you based on the knowledge you did in legal work. That's the way I could say that. I can't really go into specifics on that without a case study. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. You just got to be very careful in the way you approach every single word of a communication, even when it comes to the verbs and the adjectives or the actual sentence that you say. You've got to think and type and speak in a way that, okay, could this be twisted in the way I'm saying it in a way that's used against me for their gain. You literally have to sit like that in every moment.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, it helps most to have the facts on your side and not to have registered the domain after
Correct.
some big event by this company, and for you to have held it for a while, and for it to be sort of obvious that it was it's generic. But yeah, obviously, you just have to really couch yourself in uncertainty. I remember talking to someone who suggested that on our landers at Unstoppable, we put on every lander, this domain may be for sale instead of this domain is for sale, because it just adds an extra layer of lawyeristic uncertainty to everything, which is valuable if you're going back and reading through the receipts. So yeah, any listener can go through ChatGPT and get into the nitty gritty of the language of a UDRP and sort of parse that out for themselves, what they should and shouldn't say.
I tell you what tip I can give you that's very easy and easy to replicate, and there's a lot of people here who probably use FD, is the make offer button. In my opinion, as a Brit, this is a bit skeptical, but the word make offer, to me, I don't like it. I'm like, well, you're already devaluing what you're trying to do because you're saying that whatever you say, an offer can be made. Whereas I changed make offer many years ago to the word inquire. So then the whole approach is different. So if you inquire, you want to know information about what I have to give you. Whereas if you click make offer, then I'm already saying that you can tell me what you want to do and I will listen. Well, don't you think that the whole terminology is a lot better on a button that says inquire than something that devalues your service? That's something that made a massive difference to us, our approach.
Interesting. And you guys obviously have your own landers. And it looks like you have just a very basic information form when someone makes an inquiry. Doesn't seem to be anything special. You have to thread the needle between, me as a negotiator, I need as much information as possible. Meanwhile, I don't want to scare off, qualified people with a pernicious form that's 10 questions or whatever.
There's reasons for that as well. When we started, I think what's important for us, based on what we're trying to do, is to be clean. Looking clean and simplicity is still very important. I think that's super important. And when we did the ladders, they were very good. They're still okay. I mean, there's things that could be better, of course. But one thing that is very careful of is too much information can come back to bite you. So that's another thing for a legal standpoint. It's clean and simple because the value is built based on the relationship and the call or video call or email that is done after the inquiry. It also sets the layers apart of the journey, right? So you inquire and you might speak to someone, and that way I think it's much easier to build value as a broker than it is to divulge too much information and give too much out that could come back to bite you or may stop a prospect arriving on your phone or arriving to a contact point that you might not have had an opportunity for. So simplicity and clean and less is more can sometimes be better on the higher end assets.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, what other let's dig into valuation for a bit, which is extremely hard in the regime that you play in. I mean, walk us through it. Like, what's obviously you just have a gut feel at this point, and you're constantly tracking, other sales throughout the market, trying to get a sense for what the fair value is and what a buyer would be willing to pay. But what are your heuristics? Do you use any tools that really stick out to you? Are you just DMing a bunch of other brokers and everybody gives their take? And then how do you go about actually delivering that to the buyer, and trying to extract as much value as possible from the negotiation?
I think it's a bit of a closed world when you get that level. But I will say that the network and the friendship groups I'm involved with, it's nice to know what's happening. People do talk, but just because it's not publicized, it doesn't mean that people don't know. And that stuff is very important, obviously, to see what has sold and what is selling. But another thing I like to do is just see what's happening in a word space. So like if you see what's going on around a certain word or a buzzword, and you look at the actual, you put your shoes in someone else's shoes and you see what's happening around the word in terms of end user capabilities and end user prospects. Sometimes that is also a great giveaway to what's growing in certain digital asset spaces than just what's sold. Similarly, because if you compare like Connect.com at 10 million to Icon.com at 12 million, well, they're very similar in in plots of land on digital. They're very similar in where they sit on a plot of digital real estate, but the end users for both of those are very, very different and very, very unique in their approach. And Connect sold many, many years before than Icon did, and is which one is worth more now? It depends. Obviously, you can go down the historic value of 4 letters and pronounceable and all those kind of things, but then you can also go down the route of, well, what can it be? What can each name be used for based on what the definitions are, and what can they be used for based on what the end users are already out there for potential buyers? So that answer changes all the time. I mean, we have so many cases where a name sells, and 1 year later it could probably be worth double. I mean, look at AI, look at chat, look at the certain keywords, the buzzwords that are happening to kind of give you that information. Things change very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's certainly more of an art than a science, and there's just a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Where there's not any clear target that's set in stone. It's like you're on the ocean, and you have to, everything's moving relative to one another, and so discerning truth is difficult there.
One of the talents investors, sorry to interject, was finding buzzwords early and industries evolving early is one of the, from a broker's point of view, where I deal with end users every day, and seeing an investor spot a buzz or an industry or a keyword early, in my opinion, is one of the greatest talents I've ever seen in human evolution, especially with the internet. So being able to recognize that and see the potential future as a visionary who's investing in the namespace, I find that such a unique skill, and it's something that is taught over time, but it's so hard to be good at, and it's what sets the best from the rest. So that in itself, as someone who, my talent is not looking at those buzzwords and finding opportunities early. My talent is extracting those names and selling them for the most possible. But the talent behind finding that, I think, is like finding a needle in a haystack. And the ones who are good at that, I mean, it's a serious skill set. It's something that I can't comprehend how impressive it is when you actually look down at the geeky, nitty-gritty side of domain investing.
Yeah. So, I mean, of the domainers that and like, how would you summarize like what sets them apart in terms of this trend following and being early to a certain keyword? Like, is it their information flow? Are they just online all the time? Are they in certain tech forward chats where they're just on top of trends? What gives them that skill set, and what sets them apart?
It's funny because there's so many who are so different. I think that's what's also beautiful from being a great industry leading broker and knowing the people who invest in these assets. When you're not the same as them, and I don't put myself the same as them, I don't put myself in that bracket. I see them and I still see their skill sets and what they're good at, and they're all so different. So like if you use Andy Booth for an example, he's a visionary in .ai, and he's probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest .ai investors of our time, and he probably will go down as being remembered as that forever. So what he looks at, in my opinion, day to day is very different than some other investors might look at. And I think you have to really congratulate and appreciate that the data that they look at is so different, and it shows in their inventory. If you're a real geek and really interested in this industry, and you look through some of the great domainers portfolio, you can almost see what their research is based on what they own. And I think that's fascinating when you look at different portfolios. I think it really is. Some people are really good at investing in plurals, and some people are really good at investing in singulars, but they know nothing about plurals. Some people are really good at 3 and 4 letters and finding synonyms, and then some people aren't. And then some people are really good at finding category killer dictionary one-word names. Some people are really good at utilizing verbs, because verbs are some of the hardest things to acquire. And when you start to see how they do that differently, I mean, I'm a sponge. I just take it all in. I'll never retain it all, but I really, really appreciate the depths that they go to become good at that skill.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, even and I'm obviously a novice domain investor, zero sales. So I have to couch everything that I say on this stream with that. But even just scouring Twitter, and I tend to have a very political, sociological, and technological feed.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of very smart autists that I follow. And
Yeah.
those guys are just well springs of all the latest terms. You know what they say, like whatever the smartest person is doing on the weekend, like now everyone will be doing on the weekend, or everyone will be doing all the time 10 years later. That's basically, Twitter is basically your playground to like discover all those esoteric interests.
Yeah,
I remember a couple of weeks ago, I found this post of some guy who was talking about thermodynamic computing, reversible computing, and like biological hardware that you can basically grow in a vat to use as a computer.
Yeah.
And so I went around and like registered a bunch of names, like at least like exact match names related to those kinds of computing terms. And then some other one I found was like some nice brandables related to gene editing, because some other guy was talking about gene editing and how we're advancing so fast there. So, I mean, things like that seem to me like decent, if you have good taste. And I think you have a good grasp of the language. You can play in like hand rag land, and really go out on the curve on these kinds of terms. But again, what the fuck do I know? Take all that with a grain of salt. But there's just a ton of directions you can go in if you pay attention online like this.
I mean, even me personally, I think I hand registered a 4-letter CVCV.ai, and I was like, I can't believe that was possible. And that was 2 or 3 years ago. I couldn't believe it was even available. Like, I was blown away by it. But I see some hand registered names, and honestly, it's like playing roulette when it gets to that point. That's obviously, again, based on my experience in the high end spectrum. When I see that happening, and you do see them, you see a $20, $10 hand reg go sometimes 5-6 figures, and it does happen. Either you are a legendary visionary, predict the future guy, or you got lucky. It's one of the two, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the longer you go, the less likely it is you're just lucky.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Back to negotiation though, I'm curious, negotiation is just so much like dating, like you have to care, but you can't care too much.
Correct.
You have to be willing to walk away to get the girl. You have to show that you have options, right? There's social signaling involved here that humans are very sensitive to around, what is the social proof involved in whatever this guy is telling me. So how do you thread that needle between, for example, like reinvigorating and reactivating a stalled lead while showing that you're not completely invested and you're not going to budge down on the price too much, but you're still putting yourself out there. Like that's just one example, but how do you thread those needles and keep the conversation going without weakening your position?
I understand the question. I think firstly, to answer, one of my greatest skills is I do not fear rejection in any manner of life. Never have done, never will. It's probably the main reason I've got to where I am today. I do not care. I also don't care if I have to pitch something at $10 million and get 2,000 people say no to me. It doesn't bother me whatsoever. Also, doesn't bother me if people call me delusional. I am delusional. I'm proud to be delusional. It's why I can do what I do. The second answer to that question is, you have to master rejection, but you also have to be able to have experience over the years. And now I'm 10 years in. I can smell when something will come back. Or if I've done the research, like I said, I can see when someone is either going to convince themselves, or I've planted the seed, or I've given them enough value education that one day it'll happen. And proof is in the pudding. I can't really go into the names, but we did 3 actually. Nicola, my analyst is in the room with me now. Nick, we did 3 or 4 deals last year that came back that were I think we did 4 7-figure deals last year that were 3 to 4 years old in lead time.
I mean, I'm not even in 3-4 years, but I can tell that the last 7-figure deal we did is 1.5 years old.
Yeah.
First time we started talking to them was 1.5 years before we closed it.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, it does happen, but I also got better at knowing that and making sure that I mean, you can put some of the pieces of the puzzle together, right? If somebody's doing a rebrand and they have a certain product and they're going for a certain thing, yes, they can make another decision. But if you're a good investor or a good broker, you kind of know if there's a better decision out there for them. And if there isn't, and you can communicate effectively and build a relationship and speak to them with respect and keep open lines with them, the chances are always there. And like I said, it's never off the table, is it? Unless they've moved on, you know that there's a potential that they'll come back. And it's up to you to build that relationship, and it's up to you to build value, and it's up to you to make them know that this is the decision that they should go with and why they should do that.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, the sale is most impacted by the quality of the name. And so you are in a very privileged position just to have the quality of names that you negotiate with, because you can always walk away with these names if you know you've got 7 figures in the bag. And you know that puts you in a tremendous position to be able to be flexible and secure and not overextend yourself and not get yourself into trouble and bleed value to people.
It comes better with age, by the way. That decision comes better with age. Whereas when you're younger and you lose those deals, there is a bit more emotion involved. And nobody's perfect. I'm not Superman. I mean, there are times in my younger days where I was gutted when we'd lose a deal or when somebody would buy something else. It's just that as you get older and you start to understand the digital real estate, the digital asset world, and you start to realize that even if this person walks away, even if you can't see another end user, you've been through the cycles, right? You know that something is going to come based on the word space, based on the industry, and you believe in yourself. You just get better at believing in yourself, to be honest with you. And the same goes for investors. I mean, if you buy a name and you don't have luck on that name, but then you have luck on another name, it should instill a little bit of confidence that you should know what you're doing. The more you do it, and the more that eventually sell, you know that eventually one day one of your other names are going to sell. And you'll also know through experience which names are unlikely to sell and which ones you made mistakes on and which ones you shouldn't make mistakes on again based on what you did. And that's the beauty of domaining, is that the experience, in my opinion, it does take a long time. A lot of people can get lucky, but the luck, it helps them educate themselves quickly. Whereas you can be unlucky and slow, and it can work both ways. But that is the beauty of the world that we live in, is that eventually you either get it right or wrong, and it's whether you learn that or not. I love that about this industry.
Speaking of probability of sales, I think you're in a unique position kind of to answer this, because I remember at one point 10 years ago having a conversation with someone who used to own a lot of 3-letter domains, but with lower quality letters, and the end user demand was, let's just say, very, very low. And based on your experience with seeing, Frank's portfolio, the people you've helped move inventory and so on, what would you say are the domain names that sell the best compared to how popular they are on the reseller market, as opposed to domains that people fight over on the reseller market, but maybe don't have as much end user interest as you would expect?
Interesting question. Trying to think how to answer that question. One thing I see which baffles me is some of the names that go at auction for the prices they go for. I mean, I sometimes can't understand it. It baffles me. The average acquisition price these days, I find, especially if it's from auction, it's mind-blowing based on what I can see on the potential. It really is. I'm like, are the funds operating somewhere that are buying names up? Because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And I'm like, is this just an ego, or is it competition between domainers just to own the asset? Or is it visionary, or is it long term? I just don't know. That's the second part of the question. But can you repeat the first part of your question?
like on the one, I'm thinking about two categories of domains, right? Like on the one hand, like you mentioned, domains that tend to be popular among domain investors, but don't really have that much end user appeal. And I would probably give examples of short domains. So
Yeah.
3-letter and 4-letter domains with questionable letters, let's say.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, what all of us want, domains that maybe fly under the radar on the
Yeah.
reseller market. So the domains that investors don't really fight over, but which do better than expected with end users.
Yeah. What's the question there? What's the difference between them, or what's my experience?
He's asking like where are domainers not paying attention in the wholesale market and with their acquisitions that's actually, popular with end users?
Listen, a three-letter.com and a 4-letter.com, I understand why they're still so popular, and I understand why they're traded so heavily. What happens in the domain space is the better the quality or the shorter the name, what we're seeing and what we have seen for many years is that the liquidity involved in them, if you need to get out of the asset, is much higher. So that's why we see, in my opinion, so much back and forth with 3-letter, 4-letter.coms and people who traditionally like to buy them, because it's like a registration plate in Dubai, right? If it's 2 characters or 3 characters, there's many end users. It's also easy for you to ring your friend and get out of that asset and sell it if you have to. On the other side of that question, where you see domainers find trend words, or if you go back 3 years and you look at or 4 years and you look at the AI space, I mean, we're all late if you think about it. I mean, look at what some of these AI names are selling for in the auction now. And again, it's like, well, are we late or are we not late? And if a name sells for 30, I just saw a name at Namecheap. I think it was an AI, a podcast.ai. I think it's going for like 32,000 right now. And I'm like, mind blown. I'm like, wow. Also, like podcast.ai. I mean, like podcasts are huge now, and I agree. I mean, we're effectively doing one now, but in 10 years' time, are we still going to use that utility in that name? It could be something else. I mean, it could just be integrated into something. And the levels you see spent on those names now, it's mind blowing. So I think finding the key under the radar goes to the talent of how good a domain investor is, because it's like watching a crypto investor, so to speak. Can you find that coin, and can you find that utility or that keyword before everybody else and get in there early? Yeah, if you're good at it, you can. And if not, you can still make excellent money just trading the common assets that everybody is educated in and there's liquidity on. I mean, it's kind of, I think that's a similar comparison in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm curious, I know obviously you have a partner at Brandforce who handles more of the domaining side of things, but can you give us examples of trends or keywords where you guys were early? Something you've been working on over the past couple of years that's more recent, and if any mistakes were made recently in terms of like betting big on a particular trend that hasn't panned out. AI would be a great starting point.
Yeah,
if you guys were,
I think it's a great question,
into those names.
because speaking about the portfolio, there's so much time that's gone into every name, and there's also so much history. So like, before I was even involved, I mean, I was always brokering these names, even when I wasn't with Brandforce. But before the inventory, before my control of the inventory, there was a lot of traffic names that were held within the portfolio based on traffic. And obviously that's not the case anymore. And they're still very valuable assets. I'll give you an example. One name we have that isn't even pointing at Brandforce, but it's Brandforce owned, is stockmarket.com. And we actually now are open to letting go of that asset, and we're trying to look at potential avenues. But so you've got that kind of historic legacy data, and we even now have a legacy portfolio that we call Medusa, which is a bunch of names that they're super high quality. It's just not, they're not the names that we focused on based on our recent success and recent sales in certain categories. So what we've done now is we've positioned 3 or 4 portfolios where, like, some are 2-word brandables that, or 4-letter.coms that we're not really building too much value on, and they're just kind of done on LTOs and payment plans, and a lot of them are pointing at different areas. And then you've got the creme de la creme, which I like to think now what we focus on is killer 1-word dictionary names, short 3 letters, some 2 letters as well. We've actually invested heavily in 2-letter.coms. We have recently invested heavily in .ai also. I'm happy to I don't mind admitting that I think we're a bit late to the game in the .ai space. But we're also the long-term buyer that we want to see a bit more proof before we go heavy into something. It's a bit more like a traditional fund in that space. We like to see the proof before we go big. And I think that's a safe bet based on the long-term investor that Brandforce is. And what else do we like to invest in? I think if you could get them, things like animals, colors, verbs, some of the best investments in the world. Numbers. We've had we have a lot of traction now on verbs, numbers, animals, colors. A lot of recent sales too. Those kind of things are trading heavily. Really, when we buy, the problem with explaining what we want to invest in is that every single opportunity is unique, and most of the people listening will understand that. It's not like it just because somebody wants to invest in a four-letter.com, it might be a plural. It could be better than the singular. It might not be. It could be used for different user cases. It might have 5 different users or 5 different industries it could be attached to. It could have one industry it's attached to. It's such an open book that the quality goes back to your general education and kind of what you know in terms of what you want to buy. And luckily, the beauty of Brandforce is you have 2 different skill sets there. Of you've got what we buy, and then you've got what we sell, and each person involved in that process is probably an expert in each part of the process. Whereas goes back to the original statement of the conversation where, you can't really be an expert at everything. It's difficult. You have to pick and choose what you're good at, and having a team and being in a team where each has their unique skill set is kind of a nice team to be involved with, especially at the levels that we play at.
Yeah, well put. Well, you guys have a killer team there. I am curious, I know you have to run now, Louis, because you got a meeting. But any final words of wisdom as you, think about like projections for 2026 and beyond, and how you guys are positioning yourselves? Do you have any final thoughts on, even outside of domains, if you find yourselves diversifying, and looking to other assets in light of AI and, all the other trends we see happening?
I've been reading a lot and studying a lot, even in January and over Christmas in some downtime. I think we're still going to have a very strong year for ultra premiums. I think the crypto space is going to help massively. AI space is obviously going to lead it. I do think I actually saw what Drew said the other day on a lot of AI companies going bust is accurate. I don't think it will be as fast as maybe he thinks it will be, but it is true. But I still think we're going to have a very strong year of sales, and we're going to have a strong year of funding for that kind of space. But I also think we're at a transition area now where the investor in domains can also try to find the pockets that we've just spoken about, where are the next levels and the next buzzwords. I think we're definitely reaching a point where there's some branches and avenues where you're going to find other trends and other buzzwords where you're going to be able to focus on more investment in other areas instead of what everybody is trying to get the same piece of the pie right now. That would be my final thoughts. I also think the GTLD space will change a lot, and there's going to be some strings that get released where the aftermarket for strings may be more utilized than it previously, based on the lack of availability in the .com and .ai space. I think once a lot of these good words are going, and they are gone, especially in the .com space, and now even more so in the .ai space, it opens up the opportunity for potential in new strings that get released and what they can do based on the online presence and the online world that we live in, that is becoming less retail and less human environment orientated. So like your shop now, really, your shop on Fifth Avenue is your domain name. Having that shop on Fifth Avenue or Mayfair, and it's just like, prehistoric now. So I think the new GTLD space will open up opportunities for those who can't afford the best of the best.
Yeah, especially with the proliferation of vibe coding tools and how many more websites we can expect to see on the internet for the next couple of years. People are going to be turning away from the ultra high end names and more towards the budget names that work for them. Well, Louis, very rich conversation as usual. I appreciate all the time and all the little tips and stories you gave along the way. So many thanks. I'll let you go. But yeah, thank you again. We'll talk soon.
Very happy to see all the listeners and some friends in here too. So that was very nice. Thank you. Maybe I should do this more often.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we're sad to miss you at ICA next week, but we'll catch up at some point in the future.
I will do. Sorry I can't be there. It's very busy January, but look forward to it. Bye, guys.
See you, Louis.
Bye.
Well, that was a great conversation there. Sadly, we could only have him for an hour. It always seems like Andre, the conversation picks up, in the last 15 to 10 minutes, and we get the most exciting details, right as they're leaving. So we gotta figure out a way to make sure people can come on longer next time. But I mean, yeah, there was a lot of juicy stuff there. Everything from giving sort of the keywords, colors, animals, and some of the other focuses that they have. And, I think it's humbling and important to hear domainers of their quality admit to, being late to AI. And I think, there's an adage in trading, which is that it's okay to be late. You just have to be quick on your feet in light of new evidence. And, not everyone needs to be going for the, 100x punt and being super early to a trend. But you should be aware enough to pivot and to ride a new wave when you can see confirmation that the wave is indeed happening. And it sounds like that's what they've done with AI. Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with Louis 100%, and I predict that Louis will be busy this year because I do expect that high-end sales will do quite well in 2026. But I think that the headlines that will result will paint a misleadingly optimistic picture of the industry. So moving on to what you've mentioned, which is that people are going to move away from blockbuster domains to bread and butter inventory, given how easy it is to develop compared to the past. I think you're correct, but early. What I'm seeing now, and it's something I've noticed based on conversations I have with people, is that we're kind of in a K-shaped situation, wherein on the one hand, just kind of like the letter K, upward on the one hand, other things downward. So I would say that um, high-end domains in the Goldilocks zone. So, for example, your AI names, your tech names, everything that's in vogue now. When it comes to those, liquidity is plentiful and even downright excessive in some cases. So those are doing just fine. However, the smaller mom and pop businesses, the average person who's maybe interested in a side hustle, it's not that the people in question don't want a good domain. They definitely want one. But right now, it's difficult for them to afford it. And as a counterexample, I will give you the years 2021 and 2022, where the opposite was true because people were staying home. They were forced savers, basically, because they stayed home. They received stimulus checks, they received loans or grants for their businesses, depending on the jurisdiction. And liquidity was, once again, excessive. And in 2021, 2022, I think that these bread and butter domains acted as a pretty good sponge, so to speak, of excess liquidity. Whereas nowadays, the same people who were doing better in 2021, 2022, they're hurting a bit. And so it puts the market in an interesting position because on the one hand, these people will already want a domain. Many of these people will have no choice but to do their own thing because in many sectors, job insecurity is becoming problematic, or just the opportunity to do something on your own. So I think it's a good step. It's a good point in time to kind of get ahead of that trend. But make no mistake, the average end user, so the lower value end user, when it comes to acquisition prices, I think is struggling right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. My instinct would be most domain buyers would be on the upper arm of the K in the K-shaped economy. But I think you're right. There's plenty of mom and pop people, but especially as, vibe coding becomes more and more viable, that allows the top 1% of indie hackers to produce, more like 50% of all the websites out there, right? You're just going to have this prolific leverage for, builders who are shrewd and who are able to, efficiently deploy capital and who also have capital to deploy on a domain name. So yeah, it'll be an interesting trend to watch. What other trends do you see emerging in 2026, Andre? Any other predictions for us?
I do think that vibe coding is a big thing, and many domainers see it as a big thing. But once again, this show should be called Andre Ruins Everything, right? Because like I developed stuff myself, like I owned hosting businesses. I had a small escrow site, which was kind of indirectly sold to escrow.com, sold to agreed.com, then to escrow.com. I had development services and still have various business interests in that sector. Some brokerage as well for short domains, especially, but not that much anymore. Anyway, I tried a lot of stuff development wise. And my observation would be that on the one hand, you're right. Like it's easier than ever to just deploy applications that are decent in a very short amount of time. However, as you've also mentioned and alluded to, as so many people do it, and as a handful of people become really good at doing it, it's going to be increasingly difficult not to create applications, not to ship product, but rather to tap into this ever elusive pool of already ADHD attention. And that's kind of what I think most people don't understand, just how difficult it is to tap into attention, to promote something, to gain critical mass, and things of that nature. So on the one hand, I believe that even for domain investors, vibe coding will be an amazing opportunity to build their own tools, to analyze zone files, like just everything they want. It's just I wouldn't get carried away if I were them when it comes to how easy it is to develop, because I see so many people who have never really developed a website with any kind of traffic, let's say, who just assume that, well, if I don't sell this domain, I'm just going to develop. And it's definitely easier said than done, right? So that I think is going to be a mega trend for the year. Definitely vibe coding with these engines becoming just super good at it, right?
Yeah. And the corollary to that is that as the marginal cost of building software goes to zero, because you have just infinite like free coding capital, right? Like you no longer need engineers at all to build fairly complicated apps. And you can basically, point a screenshot of a website or share documentation with an LLM, or an agent inside Replit or Lovable or what have you, and completely replicate an API, completely replicate a website. The only thing that matters at that point is distribution. You need to get your product in front of people because there's going to be 10 other products just like yours out there because it's so cheap to build them and to replicate them. And so this has a couple of implications. Obviously, for domains are your digital real estate. That implies a lot of important qualities about your distribution and your brand, and how seriously people can take you, both in an SEO context and generative engine optimization, as they're calling it. How well you show up inside ChatGPT and the other LLMs. But it also means that you just have to be like people with product sense, and a strong following on Twitter can very much more readily monetize their assets and these apps. And I'll give you guys an example. So I made over Christmas break, I put together youryearindomains.com, and I shared this, right around New Year's Eve. And, basically the idea was I kept seeing all these various wrapped tools. So Spotify Wrapped is like the original one that we've seen, and it shows you a roundup of all your listening activity for the year. And now Cursor has one, YouTube has one. There's just all these various apps now do a Wrapped, which is a nice way to, you know, give you a sense of what kind of activity you were doing, and kind of promote kind of cement how much of your life you spend on these apps, which can be a double-edged sword. But I had the idea to do this for domains. So basically vibe coded this entire dashboard end to end, did not look at a single line of code the entire time. This was all built inside of Replit, and you can see this if you go to my profile. It's the pinned tweet, and encourage all of you to check it out and upload a CSV of your portfolio or your orders from any registrar, and you can get a nice visualization of your keywords and the popularity of each keyword, see your timeline of acquisitions over the year. You can see projected renewal costs for the next year, and a bunch of other good stuff, including, you know, histograms of your pricing points and your minimum offers, and it'll even detect if you're missing any Afternic listings for domains that are elsewhere in your portfolio. So check that out. And all the processing is private. Your CSV never leaves your browser, so you're not sending your portfolio anywhere. But I mean, it is just remarkable how good the Replit agent was at taking a pretty loose description of what I wanted, and being able to turn that into a functional product. And yeah, it's just remarkable. These tools have come a long way in the past couple of months, to the point of, I think vibe coding as a scalable skill is more viable than ever. But it does take product sense, and it does take, you know, it's not just going to happen in one go. It probably took me 20 hours of work of testing and iterating and sending out to domainers like you, Andre, for feedback, and then iterating and debugging all of these things. So it still takes product sense and a way to describe it to the agent to be able to get these things done. But wow, is it useful. So Claude Code is my next vibe coding tool I'm going to take a look at, because Claude Code is immensely powerful. You can spin up computer use agents. You can give it your credentials to log into your email or your Slack if you're feeling adventurous, manage your, you know, Amazon orders or what have you. And then you can also do API integrations to, for example, tap into SEMrush and do some analysis. I'm sure you could get an integration for .db or some of these other domain related tools. And it just looks, or, you know, for example, in my work, I'm excited to use it for crafting SQL queries to answer questions about Unstoppable's business and what our clientele looks like, and better strategize. So, I mean, these tools are just developing really rapidly, and I think if you're not dedicating some time to playing around on the frontier, you can very readily get left behind. And I like the idea of having, you know, a little agent I can farm out tasks to, and I think it gives all of us way more leverage than we've ever had access to before. So it's worth blocking out some time to explore these tools, because the world is changing scary rapidly, and you have to stay ahead of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think 2026 is going to be one of those years, and it is one of those years where people are not really sure if it's all going to come crashing down or if we're going to have a boom unlike anything we've seen before. You know, both are viable options, and I think it's really scary, like you mentioned, but also kind of cool about this year. And also, people need to test these tools and to do their own research, because I want to be honest with people. Like, the moment an agent comes that enables me to do outreach at scale, I'm not going to tell you. You know, nobody's going to tell you when that moment comes, because they're going to be too busy monetizing it. It's kind of like in those jokes, you know, I'm not going to tell you, but there will be signs, like me having only gold teeth and no longer, and closing up shop at that domain and no longer selling anything, if you know what I mean, right? So it's on you to kind of navigate this space and not rely on just others to do it for you. You know, agents are still, for for many outreach related tasks, they're still kind of dumb. So it was just an example. But I'm convinced that this year there will be developments in AI specifically that will enable domain investors to carve for themselves some kind of an edge in this industry that they never thought possible. And there's definitely a lot of money on the table when it comes to this. So personally, I mean, I don't know for other people how they're going to do it, but this year I'm really locked in so as to ensure kind of that I'm making the most of these developments, that I'm tuned in, that I have my ear to the ground, so to speak. But at the same time, I'm also creating a cash cushion for myself, and I'm also kind of preparing for periods of volatility. I think it's going to be a very challenging year. I think it's going to be a volatile year. Domaining as it is kind of like this industry where this week you have a bad week of sales and you think the industry is a scam, and then next week you have an amazing week and you think it's the best thing that ever existed, right? I think we're going to see quite a bit of that, up down volatility in 2026. And may you live in interesting times. Depends on how you interpret it, I guess.
Yeah, well, Trump is going to use use the Fed balance sheet to lower mortgage rates. He's going to set caps on executive compensation in the defense industry. He's gonna be the most socialist president we've ever had. He's going to continue to threaten the Fed until they cave and lower rates even more and stimulate the economy. So, I mean, it's hard to be bearish in spite of all of those facts. And we've already been doing some quiet stimulus with some of the facilities that the Fed has been putting out in recent months. And I mean, AI seems to be coming to a head where it's actually proving useful. I saw yesterday the team behind Tailwind CSS, which is a library for basically doing simpler front end UI implementations. They had to lay off. Again, it's a small team. I think they laid off like 4 people or something. But they had to lay them off because their revenue is down 80% because no one goes to their documentation anymore. No one goes to their website anymore because these AI tools are just so good at implementing their framework out of the box. And so it's a small case study, but it shows you, the business models of yesteryear are rapidly going the way of the dodo, and AI is taking jobs right now. Unfortunately, they are the very software engineers that use these things every day and have created the things. But I think that's a good, harbinger of a lot of the jobs that could be at risk later this year as we see these agents come to much more maturity. I mean, Google and Gmail have these agents built in now that seem to be getting better. We see these computer use agents from Claude and OpenAI and other places. A lot of manual just drudgery that happens by administrators and by secretaries and by personal assistants. A lot of that is looking to be automated, I think, this year. And so it'll take a while to see that reverberate to the economy. But if those people lose their purchasing power, then the economy is going to have a rough time. And decay is only going to be exacerbated. But
I will say, yeah.
Go ahead.
I will say this. I think that people who love Trump and people who hate Trump will both agree that he is an aggressive risk taker. And so that's kind of the tricky thing about this year, I think, because on the one hand, this aggressive risk taking can pay off and lead to the mother of all bull markets, or maybe the mother of all blow off tops. But then again, it can also lead to that one policy error that breaks everything. And so you need to be prepared, especially because, we like to think of our industry as kind of like a safe haven, but it's not. It's definitely very sensible to liquidity. I think that in a way like crypto, but probably in a different way, it acts as a sponge for excess liquidity, which kind of explains the behavior of both um, back in 21, 22. And I just want to tell people, even if you're bullish, allow yourself, the leeway to see the other scenario as well, so that you don't end up like people did with the Great Recession. Those who were in the industry back then will recall. Initially, it seemed that, oh, well, the Great Recession involves physical real estate, whereas digital real estate is the new El Dorado. It's hot. We're not going to be affected, which was wrong, because in the end, for a while at least, digital real estate was more affected than physical real estate. The fourletter.com buyout failed, for example, and a lot of liquidity was quite scarce for a while. But even that is not necessarily a bad thing, because, for example, I built a very good portfolio that included at that point in time oneword.coms and short domains and all that, kind of from the ashes of the great recession, just like Frank Schilling. Obviously, I did it on a much smaller scale, but Frank Schilling, on a very large scale, built his portfolio, one could say, from the ashes of the dot-com bubble. So yeah, this is the type of kind of environment where you definitely have to keep your eyes open.
Yeah, speaking of Frank, we talked to Louis about him, but I know you've talked to Frank a little bit. I mean, how would you characterize Frank's secret sauce, and what made him so prolific as both a builder and an investor?
I would say that in Frank's case, and a couple of other people who I know and who do very well in life, is they are go-getters. Like Frank doesn't have fancy superior education or whatever, and he doesn't need it, because he identified an opportunity and he went big, and he did it in a very diligent way, and he believed in himself relentlessly and in the product. And I think Unstoppable can also and should learn from that, in my opinion, so as to become kind of like the next domain name sales slash Uniregistry, because as Louis mentioned, he wanted it to be just right in everything he does. Like Frank Schilling now has various businesses, like he develops real estate over in the Cayman Islands. And I can promise you that if you're a fly on the wall when he's negotiating with vendors and whatnot, he cares about quality, and he wants it to be just the way he envisions it, just like he did with his portfolio, and just like he did with domain name sales, and then just like he did with Uniregistry. So I think that is kind of the secret, like believing in yourself, and having the discipline it takes to kind of see things through, which sounds like a very easy thing to do, but it's rare, because we say this from a position of, hindsight is 2020. Of course, we know that domains are super valuable and whatnot, but you have to understand that Frank Schilling caught a whole bunch of awesome domains, and he did it at scale back when some people were questioning the future of the internet. The dot-com bubble had popped. People who went all in on internet stocks or internet careers were kind of considered idiots and whatnot. And it was a very brave thing to do. People like Rick bought domains back when people thought you were crazy for buying domains. That was in the 90s. Then people like Frank, after the dot-com bubble came, so maybe you can call them the second generation of domainers, they bought domains where it was kind of established that they were valuable, but the internet was going through such a depressing period after the dot-com bust that once again, people thought you were crazy for kind of being involved in this industry. And it takes a special kind of person to persevere in an environment where people think you're crazy. Because most people, when everyone says, dude, you've lost your mind, tend to believe everyone. They tend to say, what if I have actually lost my mind? Why shouldn't I get a comfortable Wall Street job, or whatever it is your occupation is? And Most people do eventually. And then there's this very rare breed of person like Frank Schilling, who no matter what people say, no matter what everyone else says, and no matter how the odds look at a certain point in time, if they have a vision and they believe in the vision in question, they see it through, and there's absolutely nothing on this planet or on other planets for that matter that's going to stop him.
Yeah, that conviction pays dividends. I mean, one thing I notice with my CEO, Matt, is his conviction allows him to just laser focus in on whatever the end goal, the big picture item is at any point in time. And that allows you to like really make rapid decisions on anything else that's sort of peripheral, and just gets you towards that goal. So if you know where you're going, like all the steps along the way are routine and not that big a deal, and it helps you conserve your brain cycles for the things that really matter. One thing that stuck out to me, and I was curious if you have a take on this. Louis partners with a domainer that owns the portfolio behind Brandforce, and Louis, handles a lot of the sales. That's not a model that at least seems publicly replicated with, say, Mike Mann or Rick or some of these other like top end domainers. Even a lot of the ones who were here today, whether it's Josh or James Booth or some of these other guys, a lot of them seem to handle their own negotiations, which Louis, alluded to and said, that's quite a rare combination to have both skill sets. I'm curious if that's something you keep tabs on. Like, do the Mike Manns and the Ricks of the world actually have top brokers that are handling a lot of these negotiations, or do they end up doing it all themselves? It looks like Rick handles a lot of them himself.
Yeah,
Mike Mann, I think, has so many that he would have to farm it out.
Yeah. So Louis is spot on when he mentions that, kind of like it's very difficult to find someone who's a super talented designer and also a super talented programmer. It's super difficult to find someone who's super talented at acquiring domains, but also super talented at getting them sold, especially at the high end. Rick does it, but the thing with Rick is that when you have inventory of the quality that he has, at the end of the day, it's kind of like being the head of a country that's resource rich and has the smartest people in the universe living there. It's very difficult. You can try socialism, you can try capitalism, you can try all of the isms, and you're going to probably get it right because your country has so much potential. And I feel that the same thing is valid for Rick's potential. Like, I'm sure, for example, that if Rick would have had someone like Louis on board who kind of specializes in these large scale deals, why not? He could have closed deals that he ended up not closing, but it's difficult to tell. With Rick, the thing is, when you have inventory of that quality, you can afford to do whatever it is you want. Mike Mann, now he's a different situation for sure than Rick, because he built his domain market portfolio quite late in the game. Earlier than that, he had built bydomains.com, a portfolio which he then sold, and then he started over building domainmarket.com, and he basically replicated what he did with bydomains. And I know that he has his employees.
What's the story there? I mean, why would he sell the whole thing and start over from scratch? That seems like did he have a change of heart? Did he just want to get out of the game and then came back? Like, do you know what happened there?
I mean, why not at the end of the day, right? He got a good offer. Why did Frank sell at the end of the day? Why did Mike Birkins sell Most Wanted Domains at the end of the day, right? Like, they got offers that were compelling enough to be accepted, and so they accepted. I recall a story Mike Mann used to share about the buyers of buy domains and how it was a pretty drawn out process, and he was like, okay, is the sale going to take place? Is it not going to take place? They did a lot of due diligence on the names, but eventually they gave him an offer that he ended up deciding was too good to refuse. And the same thing with Mike Birkins, the same thing with with Frank Schilling. I think probably the riskiest thing in the domain business is getting too attached to your assets. Like, as someone who sells wholesale, I don't really have that because I turn over so much inventory that it would be kind of impossible to have that kind of attachment. But people are different, circumstances change. Frank Schilling, for example, since we mentioned him, he no longer is interested in the domain industry. Like, he's done it for so long and he's seen everything there is to be seen. Now he wants to focus on his real estate stuff. He has a bunch of other brick and mortar type businesses over there in the Cayman. He has real estate interests in the United States and Canada as well, and whatnot. And that's why he sold. As always in this industry, I don't think I've ever seen an industry like domaining where no matter what kind of a business model you think of, I can give you an example of a person for whom it works. Like, if it's being a lone wolf and just being yourself no matter what, that's Rick Schwartz. If it's aggressively building out portfolios, that's Mike Mann. If it's kind of chasing after your visions and retiring on an island, that's Frank Schilling. If it's focusing on short domains, there are so many people who are active there. If it's focusing on AI domains, maybe it's Igor, maybe it's one of the other people who do it. If it's focusing on singulars or plurals, like Louis said, like literally no matter what kind of a business model type you can think of, I can probably give you an example of at least one person in the domain industry who's absolutely killing it with the business model in question. Now, intuitively, I would tend to say that what Louis is saying makes sense, right? So if you're super good at buying domains, at acquisition, you should let other people represent your names. I think I remember at one point it was Josh who mentioned the same thing, and other people who are good at acquisitions who are like, look, I bought these domains, I have this portfolio. Maybe I'm too attached to them. Maybe someone else who just brokers will do a better job at it. So why don't I let other people represent my name? So I think Josh, for example, had Media Options represent Andrew Miller. Just a lot of people represented his names at various points. And I think that's kind of a symbiotic relationship, because you've seen with our interaction with Louis that he's such an easygoing guy. I'm convinced he's super sociable. I'm convinced you can put him in a real life setting where he has to pitch something to a room full of people and he would do an awesome job. Whereas a lot of times the people who are really good at building amazing portfolios, if you put them in a room with people and ask them to make pitches, they're going to be awkward. They're going to be, kind of like off in their vibes, and they're not going to do a good job. So intuitively, I would guess that partnering up with somebody who complements you is something that would make sense. But after so many things that I've seen in this industry and after seeing every imaginable business model work, I'm like, I would be careful before drawing definitive conclusions. Let me say that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Louis might actually come back and join us. He was an hour early to the meeting, so we'll see if he comes back. What else do we have here? What else stood out to you about that conversation with Louis?
Well, first of all, something worth repeating is that literally everyone who contacts me, I don't know why so many people contact me to ask about outreach when I don't do outreach, but I think it's a popular thing to assume that people do, and it's something that makes sense for people to think about, right? So they contact me, and literally every time, the person who contacts me to ask something about outreach thinks that outreach involves basically spamming people's email address, right? And then you had Louis come here and said, look, to do outreach properly, you have to be willing to pick up the phone. You have to be willing to make the calls. And it's such a different perspective compared to what the average domain investor thinks that end user outreach is. Like, if we were to kind of have them survey and ask regular domainers what they think, I would assume that most people think that outreach is just spamming potential end users, saying a prayer and hoping for the best. And once again, coming back to the thing I keep saying about our industry, that can work as well, right? And maybe when we have agentic solutions that don't suck and that can enable us to do so at scale. So if they can enable you to reach out to end users for hundreds or thousands of domains at a time, why not? But something that stood out is indeed the fact that really to maximize results, you should be willing to put yourself in these uncomfortable positions, to pick up the phone, to to call people and kind of close deals that way. And maybe the main takeaway here, especially for beginners, I would say, is that there's a big discrepancy between what people think domain investing is and what domain investing actually is. It's kind of like people think outreach is just spamming end users, whereas you have brokers like Louis who teach you that it can be so much more sophisticated. The same way, people who form an opinion about domain investing based on people bragging about sales on X think that domain investing is a never-ending dopamine rush where you have amazing sales because look at all these people on X who are doing well. But that's not correct either. For every person you see doing well on X, I'm convinced there are many people who are doing poorly, and even the person you see who is doing well on X now, probably if you would have asked him or her to describe their experience a few months ago, they would have told you that they're not in an amazing period for their career. Once again, the difference between what people think domain investing is and what domain investing is in terms of revenue potential. People think that you come to this industry and you will become rich because domain investing is here to make everyone rich, whereas really there are extremely few people in this industry who have $1 million per year in sales. Again, not take home profit, no, just sales. Then from that million in sales that so few people have, you have to subtract renewal fees, you have to subtract what you've spent to acquire domains, you have to pay taxes, you have to pay various expenses, and then you're left with something. And I guess that's kind of the thing I'm fighting for whenever I have public appearances, but I guess also on my blog and on other occasions, to help people kind of establish a realistic perspective as to what domain investing actually is, especially since I don't think that realistic perspective is a bad thing. Like for the overwhelming majority of people on this planet who don't live in San Francisco or Switzerland or Tokyo, but who live in all these other areas where the cost of living isn't as high, it can be the most amazing thing that ever happened in your life, but you just have to treat it with the kind of realistic mindset that I encourage people to have. So I would say that if you believe in New Year's resolutions, I'm kind of ambivalent on it. I just try to do what makes sense all the time. But like if you believe in New Year's resolutions, I would probably, especially if you're a beginner, I would set this as a New Year's resolution. Focus on what works, on what's going to make you money now, on what's going to enable you to build on a solid foundation. Because if there's one thing I don't want to see this year again, it's people who are perpetual dreamers and who treat it like a lottery ticket and who lose money year in and year out, hoping and praying it's going to get better. So maybe let's try to change that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You
Now,
speak about outbounding. I saw Aaron actually commented on the space here saying that he's created a MCP server for connecting into NameBio and Hunter.io. Hunter.io is a Web3 lead enrichment platform. So Aaron's tipping his hand that he has a lot of crypto names here. But yeah, basically it allows him to use Claude to hunt for prospects and pull a bunch of lead enrichment data as well as historical sales to figure out where his domains might be able to be sold. Aaron, if you're out there, would love for you to come up and talk about that. I sent you an invite. But yeah, I think that's just one of many examples of tools that are now readily accessible for even non-technical people to build, to be able to give them a ton of leverage if they're doing outbound or if they're just needing to automate some of their inbound checklist to do items of building up a brief on some lead. So yeah, I think we're really in a new regime where if you're not using these AI tools, you're really being left behind, because it gives you just so much more power and leverage to be able to farm out these things.
And speaking of, okay, moving on from beginners to more experienced domainers, it was kind of interesting to check out the list of acquisitions that Rick Schwartz had, and it was kind of interesting to see in the various groups I'm a member of, which have a lot of active domain investors as members there. You're in some of them too. It's interesting that it humanizes Rick a lot, because at the end of the day, if you look at his recent list of acquisitions, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily in any way impressive. It's more like I would say the list of acquisitions of someone who is very financially comfortable, who is kind of like, sitting on these amazing domains and who doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. So contrast that to people who are hustling like there's no tomorrow, like, James Booth, like Josh. Whenever you hear Josh appear on a show or whatever, he's going to tell you that he has domains on payment plans and he's acquiring stuff. And I've seen also some of the auctions he won and deals he had. He mentioned one on Sherpa where even Rosner was like, dude, you paid how much for the domain? So it's kind of interesting to see this ecosystem in its entirety, and kind of the difference between someone like Rick, who is kind of, has no reason really to be very aggressive because he's sitting on this amazing inventory, and to see the hustlers of this industry who are, people like James or Josh on the retail side. I would venture to also include me on the wholesale side, but just like kind of like the peanut gallery version thereof. So yeah, it is kind of interesting to see the industry evolve, so to speak, and to see it evolve by looking at what people are doing in the higher echelons.
Yeah. Aaron, what's up? Spill the beans on this MCP server, man.
What's up, guys? Yeah,
Right?
so I'm not like a dev or anything like that, and I've just been vibe coding for like, I don't know, 6 months or so, just teaching myself Claude Code and building apps and things like that. Sounds like kind of what you do, Brady, just tinkering and building like tools for myself. But I use Claude to like walk me through the entire process of connecting with my .db API as well as Hunter, which I heard you say something about Web3. I don't own any Web3 names. I use Hunter to validate email addresses for prospects that I find. So I set up all these different Claude skills that will use the MCP server, which is hosted locally on my computer. So I'm not sure how I would share that with you guys. I'll try to figure out if I can. But I just have Claude walk me through everything and like set it all up. And if I don't understand, I just ask questions like the idiot I am. And so what it'll do is it will, I'll give it like an SLD, like how .db works. So it'll show you all the TLDs it's registered in, and then all the other domains that are registered with that SLD included in it. And then Claude will filter all those, visit every single link, make sure it's an actual live site, and it's not just like something dead from 10 years ago that's not worth reaching out to. And then from there, it will take all of those URLs that it found as prospects, run it through Hunter. And Hunter is like a database of verified emails. So it will find like actual working email addresses. So, like Brady at whatever domain.com. And so it'll give you like a list of all these different email addresses from that domain that are verified, that your email is not going to bounce. So it really helps your kind of sender reputation for emailing. And I mean, this is like, not smart. So like anybody could do this. So if you haven't like started playing around with Claude or any of these like vibe coding tools, like it's so powerful. And it took me maybe like, I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour to like connect them with my APIs and my tools that I already have. So yeah, I don't know. That's how I'm doing it, but I don't know how many questions I would be able to answer because I'm not very technical, but yeah, anybody can do it now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I love. I was counting on two hands how many times you called yourself an idiot, which I think is a bit demeaning. But you're exactly right in that it's just a matter of willpower now, and you can do a lot of technical things with just perseverance and asking the right questions of an AI chatbot. Are you using this in Claude Code on the command line, or are you using it inside of Claude, the web app?
I'm using it on the desktop app. So the web
Okay,
app
gotcha.
has certain integrations, and then if you have the desktop app, it allows other like local integrations. So that's where you can like host your own MCP server, or customize, add your API for any service you have, and it'll like walk you through setting it up. And I just use the desktop app for that. I do use like the CLI, the command line interface, Claude Code, but I haven't found a benefit of doing that versus just using the desktop app, which seems like more, um, I don't know, like it makes more sense to me just as an app versus I've never like started coding on terminal or anything until the last few months. So I just feel more comfortable in like simplified interfaces like the desktop app.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for those of you listening, basically an MCP server, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's more or less just a standardized way for LLMs to talk to APIs. And so whether that API is .dbs or name bios or a custom one that you build, then this MCP allows. I don't know if ChatGPT actually supports MCP connections.
Yeah, they do.
I know they've announced it in the past. I'm not sure if they actually do, but Anthropic, built the MCP standard, and so they obviously support it inside of Claude. So basically, what Aaron's done is he's put his API keys into a file on his computer, and Claude helped him set it all up. And that allows, when he's using Claude the chatbot, the Claude chatbot talks to his computer via the MCP connection, and on his computer, he pings the .db API for whatever query that he has, whatever SLDs, and same thing with his Hunter.io integration. And then all that data reappears back inside the chatbot, where he can manipulate it to his heart's content, and iterate really quickly and get a bunch of leverage in terms of finding and qualifying these leads. So that's more or less what's happening, and that's really cool, Aaron. I've had it on my to-do list for a couple of weeks now to really sit down with Claude Code, and try to replicate a lot of the flows that I'm seeing pop up all over Twitter. So yeah, in terms of the output and the results that you're seeing, like, are you able to outbound at much higher scale now? Are you seeing actual sales and conversations come out of this outbounding efforts now?
So I've never outbounded. I've been like, I don't know. I hate doing it. It just seems like busy work to me, and I'm not like extroverted whatsoever. So I literally just set it up within the last couple months because this year that's my goal, is to like scale that out. And it's just really cool how this is something that is just like a time suck, where in the past, it's hard to train some like overseas VA or something like that on like the intricacies of what to look for in prospecting. But this is just busy work that you no longer have to just like click every link and see if it's an actual live site, and you don't have to like validate the email addresses yourself anymore. And so it's just sort of like, I don't know, it's like I can do at scale what before I would have had to hire several VAs or specialized roles to do that and train them, where natively now Claude can just use um, integrations with things like Context 7, which kind of is just like a database of all the like, I don't even know really how to describe it, but like any technical thing online, it's kind of like the de facto updated um, version of that, so it can reference that to see like the latest settings and what it needs to do to configure it to whatever your use case is. So, I mean, it's just this technology is crazy, and it's not hard. Like that's the main thing is if you're just curious and you just start asking questions and then like following that train of thought and seeing where it goes, you can end up with something like really powerful.
Yeah, no, it's an inspiring story to have the bravery to wade into that territory, even being non-technical. So yeah, what's next in your evolution? Do you have other tools that you plan on building out or automating, or maybe you've already automated some other things, and this is the third project that you've had with Claude. What's next in store?
So I just signed up for Smart Lead. I think it's like a CRM and like automated email sequence software is how I would describe it. And it also features like um, email warm up settings where you can add your different domains that you're going to be sending from, and it will, send and receive emails on your behalf in the background to help your sender reputation. And that also integrates, it has an API. So now I should be able to, once I get this sort of curated list of contacts to outbound to, then I should be able to set up like custom flows and things that just it's like kind of like a drag and drop interface where it'll use like semantic words and things to not like repeat the exact same language each email. So that's kind of like what I'm working on right now. And then once that's done, it's kind of I'm just gonna like put my foot on the gas and like see what happens, because I've never outreached to any of my domains in my portfolio. And so it just makes sense that if now you have the ability to contact people somewhat at scale, or like be more selective without having to do all that research yourself, then it's only going to help my sell through rate increase. So that's what I have right now, is just sort of like figuring out like what tool stacks I want to use for this, which ones are best, for what part of the process. And then once I have that all like working together, then I'm just gonna scale it, and know I'll keep everybody updated with how it's working.
Hey, Aaron, you mentioned that you didn't have any prior experience with reaching out to end users. I'm curious, since you'll be doing it this year, do you plan to split test? So this method that you've mentioned on the one hand, whereas compared to also like old school methods such as scraping the zone file and finding people who own domains that are sent that contain your main keyword. So if you own bestautos.com, contacting bestautosonline.com if it's registered, thebestautos.com, and so on and so forth. So do you plan on kind of split testing your model versus previous ways of doing things so as to kind of determine if the model you have right now is superior, or how do you plan to kind of implement this so as to make the most of your outbounding this year?
Yeah, so that .db integration does exactly what you just described. So that will pull all those URLs that contain whatever keyword or keywords you want included, and then cross-reference those to see who's um, active still or worth reaching out to. I mean, it does such a good job, like without me even explaining what to do, it automatically like qualifies it for me. It finds information about the founder or whoever I'm going to be reaching out to. So it writes a customized email to each one of these. And this is done autonomously. Like I'll just give it a list of 10 domains or 10 SLDs, and then it will just go out like 45 minutes later, come back with this curated list of prospects for them. And I mean, even if you do nothing else but that, like that's pretty powerful to just have that information working as you're doing other things that are more profitable for your time. And yeah, but in terms of split testing, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that much, but I'm like a tinkerer and I always like sort of document what I'm doing. So um, yeah, I don't know what KPIs I would sort of be tracking for that offhand, but I'm glad you brought that up because that's definitely worth looking into.
So, Aaron, when you're doing a couple of steps here, so it's fairly complicated. One, I'm wondering, Claude helped you set up the flow here, right? So you've got a chain of actions and a data flow between the actions. And I would imagine you just, when you were setting up this, is it an action or like, what do they call it inside Claude, this workflow? And then also, you're saying you're verifying that there's a website at the domain to make sure it's actually working. Does that involve like a computer use agent actually opens up the domain inside of a browser and looks at it and determines something about the web page that's rendered there? Like, walk us through like each of those steps and what exactly is the Claude is doing in the background for each of those.
Yeah. So it's called Claude Skills is what I think you're referring to, and you can research. There's a ton of documentation about them, but basically what they do is you set up a skill, and then anytime you use any keywords related to the task that skill completes, it's going to automatically know to start doing that skill. So this process, I forget how many different skills I have integrated, but like I have one skill that's just verifying email addresses, one skill that's just the name bio part of this, where it's just finding a whole list of the domains. Then the next skill is going to open each one of those in a headless browser and then confirm that it's actually like a live site. I don't know what it's checking there, maybe the HTML or something with like a copyright date or like the last time anything was posted, a new page was added to the site, but it does a really good job of just quickly seeing whether or not this is a site that's worth spending time looking into more. And so it kind of just, once I ask it to do something, then it just logically follows these steps. And I make sure to like reference in my prompt, like, make sure to use the domain, what do you call it? Confirming like that each email address is an actual verified email and that you're not just sending out emails to bounced email addresses. And so like within each one of those skills, you can have them as complex as you want them. So like each one can have like different sub skills in them where it will call the .db server, find the domain, and then it will not add a contact email address unless it has confirmed that it has seen that email on the live site. So when I first set this up, I noticed that Claude was sort of like hallucinating a lot of these like first name at whatever domain.coms, and it was just literally guessing based on the founder's name. And so you do have to kind of like, it takes a little bit to set this up and get all the like nuances worked out. But once it's all set up, then you can, I mean, reference these skills anytime in Claude. And this is not native to the desktop app. You can do this in the web app as well, unless you want to incorporate it with the MCP server. If you have a hosted locally or something, that's what I use the desktop app for. So Claude skills, MCP servers, API integrations, each of those are like rabbit holes that you can go down. And I by no means think I have like this figured out or like the best process. So I'm sure people would find out like way better use cases and efficient ways to use this.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting to hear, Aaron. It's making me feel inspired to go ahead and get in front of this. I mean, just the granularity that you have to describe the, heuristics and workflows for each step is really remarkable. And I think that's, the devil's in the details. And I remember a year ago trying to sit down with the Perplexity API and build something like this. And Perplexity would do the exact same thing. It could find LinkedIn links, okay. But as soon as you wanted to, churn out a verified list of emails. Like I remember I would just take the output from Perplexity, a bunch of emails that are relevant for a certain domain. And then I would throw them into Gmail and, mass BCC 70 people at one time and mass send an email. And something like 70% of the emails are just totally made up. And so it sounds like you've gone through the drudgery of testing that and figuring out exactly what magic words you need to say to Claude to circumvent that sycophancy that Claude tends to do. But man, it's God, it's we live in such a crazy time. Like this is so much power at your fingertips to farm out tasks at just an ultra cheap rate, and to be able to keep these things working like 24/7, running off and doing 45-minute tasks at a time. It's pretty scary if you aren't using the tools and you aren't staying ahead of the curve. I think a lot of people are going to be blindsided by these things, in the coming months to years if they don't develop the skill sets to give themselves more leverage and more job security. But wow, very cool, Aaron. So what else is new? What other AI tools are you playing with? Or you can just talk about your domaining hustle. I haven't spoken to you yet, so it'd be great to just understand more of where you're coming from as a domainer.
Sure. So my background is in e-commerce, and I've done that for like 15 years full time. And so that's how I kind of got into domaining, is like one, buying better domains for my e-com sites, and then two, I was really heavy into SEO, so I bought a ton of expired domains that had a lot of backlinks and traffic coming to them, set up basically like feeder sites to my main e-com site, and I would have like hundreds of these networks. Like it's technically a public blog network, which kind of has a negative connotation to it, but if you know what you're doing, there's ways to not leave a footprint with them, and to like everyone in e-commerce that I know in SEO is like killing it with this right now. But so that's how I got into domaining, and then just over the years I found like Domain Sherpa, all the tools, Josh's podcast, and just like I couldn't get enough information. Like I've listened to every single podcast I could find about domains over the years, and I just became obsessed with it. So now I still have my ecom sites, but it's very, very passive, and I spend a majority of my time on domains. And I also just sold like my main ecom site at the end of last year, so I'm going to have even more time now. But so over the years, I think I have around 3,800 names. A majority of those are brandables. I think like 2,200 of them are Atom Premium approved, and then the rest of them are like relatively strong, .ios, or now I'm expanding more into like .app, .dev, just like whatever I see is kind of trending in like the startup world. And since I have a background in ecom and startups and stuff, I kind of have like I'm I'm always looking out in that industry and seeing all the trends and everything. But so that's kind of how I got started and where I'm at right now. And last year was the best year I've had in domaining. So this year I want to like actually take time to set all these processes up to see how far I can push this now that I have the time and don't have to be in the weeds on my ecom business.
Yeah, that's exciting. So you have moved away from these age domains with backlink value, and you're focused more on brandables, and that's where most of your acquisitions lie these days.
Yeah, I do a lot of like lower end auctions, like sub $1,000. And then previously I did a lot of closeouts, and I just, for whatever reason, I haven't seen a lot of the same quality names coming through there. And so I've been a little bit more selective. And recently, now that I'm like knowing I'm going to scale this outbounding campaign this year, I've been really focusing on like buying names with, very clear prospects available. Like, I'm sure everybody else does, but before that wasn't really a focus of mine since I was more of like a branding person and I've started multiple startups and have a background in design and branding and marketing. So now I'm kind of like making the switch more towards less brandables, which are going to become harder to discover, I think, in the coming months. And um, really trying to stick with like one word, high sell through rate TLEs like .ai, .io, .dev seem to be doing really well right now. And yeah, I don't even remember what the original question was, but that's an answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think, chatbots are rapidly eroding the edge that people have in brandables as well, because it's so much easier to riff on a name and basically do what do they call it? There's like a domain mixer or something where you add a bunch of prefixes or suffixes to a name basically and try all the different combinations. But yeah, LLMs are obviously very good at creating brandables out of thin air for a given term. I'm curious how you see .io evolving with AI coming to the fore, and sucking up a lot of the air out of .io's presence. And then we also have some .io price increases coming up in a week and a half. So I think it's at least a $5 or $10 increase in the renewal price. And at Unstoppable, we're actually keeping the new registration price for .io the same at around 35, I want to, or 30, 31. So the registration price will be the same for about the next 6 months, but renewals will increase slightly. So I'm curious, are you renewing ahead of time to lock in the lower price, even though it's, only $5 more? How are you thinking about just the evolution of IO in the next couple of months?
Yeah, last year I kind of did like a thorough audit of my .io names because the price, was it this year or 2025 it increased as well? I don't know, it was sometime within like the last yearish or so where there was a price increase. And when I saw that was happening, I kind of weeded out the lower end of the .ios I was carrying. So in terms of this price increase, I'm pretty confident in the inventory that I have, and it's not going to really affect what I'm renewing. And part of that is because like over the last 6 years, the highest sell-through rate uh, that I've had on a TLD is .io, and it's not even close. And I have, uh, I don't know, I think around like 800 .io names, somewhere around there. And so it is a significant price increase, but I can justify it based on like what I've seen anecdotally on the sell-through rate of .io. And then I did notice like a pretty heavy uptick of .io sales personally in my portfolio last year, especially the second half of last year. And looking at like Y Combinator data and sort of startup data in general, I'm seeing like a trend up in .io again now that like the prices of .ai are getting so insanely high. I don't know how much that has to do with it, but and again, it's just anecdotal. But since it's been so consistent over the years, I'm not really planning on doing much. If I hadn't weeded out sort of the lower end of my portfolio of alternative extensions last year, then I would definitely be doing that right now, like especially with how much it's increasing. But it's not really affecting me as much as had I not done that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. This goes back to what Louis closed with, which was that as premium comms and AIs just skyrocket in price, the demand for more esoteric TLD is going to grow, either in the new GTLD round or, you know, in our own backyard with something like IO. Yeah, how else? So you're saying that resurgence in IO has been somewhat anecdotal. I think we had someone on the pod not too long ago that was saying something quite similar, that they were seeing an increase in IO sales. Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, what else are you? Are there any other theses you have for 2026 in terms of TLD trends or new terms you're looking into?
Not particularly, but I mean, I always sort of I have like a spreadsheet of keywords that I keep. And so I'm like constantly sort of um, like auditing the startup ecom and like domaining industries to make sure I'm on top of all the like current terms and trends and whatnot. So not really. And, you know, I'm sure I'll fine tune it as I go, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. And then I did notice that .bet seems to be doing pretty well. And I know historically quite a few of my like higher end .io sales were gambling related names. So um, you know, that is something I'm thinking about and seeing how .bet is going to keep trending. You know, it seems like it's getting more and more traction, but um, you know, I'm just kind of like looking at little things like that. And it's hard when you have like only so many names. And, you know, that's why I'm like always on X now and just sort of like seeing what other people are seeing and trying to really involve myself in the community because it's hard. Like I'm pretty um, naturally introverted, so I don't normally do stuff like this. And I just see the value of it now and having like a community and people that you can sort of reference and whatnot. And just real.
Sorry, I muted you, Aaron, accidentally.
Oh, it's all good.
There you go.
What did you hear any of it?
Yeah, it was just in the last 3 seconds.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all I said is just thank you for putting these on, and I learned so much through these and through the community. So it's just really cool to see people like you like step up and take a role and like listen to the community, be a part of the community, and see how transparent you are with your business and everything. So yeah, thank you guys for doing these. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad to hear you get some value out of it. It's certainly fun for me. We were talking about Frank Schilling earlier, and what separated him and Uniregistry from other products in the market. And really, I think the implication behind what Louis was saying around, you know, the CRM is really good, and he just like drives and he has conviction around what the product should look like. The underlying truth there, that is the secret sauce, is that Frank was his own customer. You know, he is a top domainer, and he understands all the needs of both domainers and brokers along the way. And if you are designing a product for yourself, the feedback loop is just way tighter in creating all the little UI tweaks and small little features along the way that make a product delightful and powerful to use. And I think that's what I get out of these spaces, and talking to people like you and trying my hand at domaining myself, is putting myself into domainer's shoes, and being able to anticipate your needs so that we can build something you know, really great and unstoppable. But yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you get some value out of it. And it's always delightful to get someone like you, who I encounter, you know, from time to time on domaining Twitter, and then, you know, lo and behold, you're just a wellspring of information, and you're willing to share, you know, your own journey and some of the latest and greatest and the tools and keywords that you're using. So it's great to be able to encounter people like that. And I think it all comes to a head when you come to some of these conferences. Like, I'm going to the ICA next week, and the ICA is like, you know, cream of the crop domainers, really fraternal and intimate. just a great time. And then you get to meet all the personalities on Twitter that you've been interacting with over the past year. Finally put faces to names, and it really makes the online community that you've been developing feel so much more real when you actually get to hang out in person together and see how people are behave when the camera's not rolling. So yeah, it's great. I think everyone should be trying to involve themselves and create group chats, send DMs to people. There's a ton of alpha in being able to just chat with people behind closed doors about some of the strategies that they're implementing in domaining. I know Louis was a little hesitant to come on today because he tends to be more private. I think he told me, what's the point in drawing attention to yourself in this industry, and especially if you're a domainer, there is a zero-sum game that we're playing, fighting over the same names, and so it makes a lot of sense. But if for anyone getting started, especially, like, it's important to get feedback and find an inner circle where you can find people you trust and get feedback from. Yeah, anything else going on for you, Aaron, before we wrap? It's been a nice little 2.5-hour space here.
Not really, but yeah, I'm looking forward to jumping into the next conferences. I had a scheduling conflict for the ICA one coming up. Really wanted to go, but yeah, it'll be cool meeting everybody and just sort of developing this community more. And it's such an awesome and like supportive community. Like, I have not run into anybody that I've had like a negative experience with, and I don't know, I just love domain names.
Yeah, it's a fun little neck of the woods that we find ourselves in. And yeah, Aaron, I appreciate you sharing about your Claude experiences. It's certainly got me juiced up and ready to jump in and experiment with it for my own workflows. So yeah, keep us updated. We'll be keen to see how that evolves. I'll probably make a post here in a week or two sharing some of my findings. But yeah, appreciate you being open and transparent about all of that. As for everyone else, it is 599.com Friday at Unstoppable. We've seen a great resurgence in some activity over the past week as people kick off the new year. And our transfer deals, which are 2,599.com transfers for Domainer Club members, are still ongoing. We do expect that pricing to change at some point in Q1, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I mean, we continue to have just the most insane pricing in the industry. You may have seen a little bit of dirt that Kalen brought up on Twitter. I can't say much there, but I will say what I already stated in that thread, which is that we are in an ongoing dispute with Kalen over large-scale abuse of our transfer promos. And unfortunately, I can't say more, but that is that. And hope you guys are able to jump in and take advantage of those on a smaller scale with less abuse, because they do happen to be the best pricing in the industry. Let's see, product updates. We've been improving our dashboard. If you look at some of my past tweets from the last week or so, we added some new dashboard columns, so you can see your number of offers and number of leads, like chat inquiries per domain. We added sorting by purchase date and expiration date and some other good stuff on the dashboard that makes it just a little bit easier to use. And coming down the pipe, we're going to have some improvements to external listings. Hopefully in a month or so, we're going to let you be able to use our landers, even if the domain is not at Unstoppable. So that should give people a lot more flexibility if you want to try out our landers without transferring in. And we'll probably give the landers a facelift as well, just make those a little bit more polished and more beautiful. I think we could stand to add some forms to help collect information from leads when they're submitting an inquiry as well. So all that is stuff that we're actively working on. But yeah, things are moving, guys. It's great to hang out with all of you and see some familiar faces in the crowd. If you guys are coming to the ICA in Vegas next week, hit me up. Would be great to chat. I'm sure we'll run into each other. And yeah, happy $5 Friday. I hope you guys get out and touch some grass. And
One thing I want to suggest to people, since last time we did the show, they should really check out the seller storefronts that Unstoppable have. I know you're still working on them, but they're like so much better than what you had before. So for people who are active on forums and want to kind of put their portfolio in their signature, or people who are active on X and want to put a link to their portfolio in their bio, I think if you check out, they can find more information on Brady's X account, but it's quite good. It's so much better than before. And so, yeah, this is the feature. I think it's a recent thing you've implemented, certainly since last time we talked. So, yeah, also the marketplace is becoming more active, which is, as a wholesale guy, something I definitely want to see. So, didn't want to end the show before encouraging people to check out the storefront and also, I would say, the marketplace.
yeah, thank you, Andre. I appreciate you reminding me there. That is definitely the biggest product update that's come out. So the seller storefronts, like Andre mentioned, you can check those out if you look at my past tweets that came out probably a week ago. But now the seller storefront is searchable. You can sort. You can, and we just have a nice, tidy list of all of your domains in one place. So if you're sharing that with a potential buyer, it makes it way easier for them to find what they're looking for and for you to close that sale. So check that out. More updates coming down the pipe for that, but it should be a vast improvement over what we had before. Before we go, guys, I'm curious what your New Year's resolutions are. I was thinking just now of a great quote by Mark Twain that has really been one of the quotes that I think aligns well with my New Year's resolutions. So the quote is, "I've suffered a great many catastrophes in my life, and most of them never even happened." Which is a very funny way of saying we live in prisons of our own creation in this messy human experience that we all find ourselves in. And most of my New Year's resolutions surround getting out of my own way and letting go of like stories I have about myself and certain characteristics I assert that I have that really end up being prisons about myself, whether it's me being introverted or me being a certain way, or especially like wanting to eschew social interaction and instead get my needs online. I'm trying to get out of my own little box that I've created for myself and be more free to reinvent myself continuously. I'm curious what you guys' New Year's resolutions are.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned it because I just opened the book I've written with Frank, and it kind of goes in line exactly with what you said. The first quote from chapter 1 is a quote from Ralph Waldo Trine, which goes, "Some of your griefs you have cured, and the sharpest you still have survived. But what torments and pain you endured from evils that never arrived." And I think that this is very representative of my way of thinking, because as an economist, I'm oftentimes kind of paid to be pessimistic. And one of my goals for 2026 is this: not to kind of let my natural and professional skepticism keep me from exploring all of the awesome stuff that exists, both in the domain space and beyond, because whether the year will prove to be an amazing one, a volatile one, a bad one, who knows? There's awesome stuff to be done and cool experience to be lived regardless, I think.
Yeah, really well put. I love that quote. It's really on the nose. what really like brought this to the fore for me was seeing this tweet. It's like a 4-panel comic of this kid who's like he's like bored one day and he gets an idea to make a a little pillow fort, and then he hangs up all these monsters, and like the fort is on fire, and he's got all these like fictional monster character posters that he's hung up on the wall inside the fort, and then he convinces himself so clearly that the situation is real that he like sobs and he's like rolling on the floor crying, afraid of these monsters and the fire that he's built in his own head, which is just such a perfect microcosm of what we do as humans, which is uh, creating boogeymen and problems of our own creation. What is the other quote? I think it's the Buddha, right? He's like, oh no, I forget who it is, but they say, nothing is neither good or bad, only thinking makes it so. That may have been Shakespeare, I think. But get out of your own head, quit overthinking things and making up stories about your circumstances that end up being self-perpetuating, and just live and do, I think is the bottom line there. What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, so I'm focusing on the outbounding. That's kind of like my main project this year, but sort of like developmentally or personally, I'm going to sort of force myself to do more stuff like this that I'm like really, really not comfortable with, and that normally I'd be in my head about, like judging myself or, thinking what other people think about, what I know about domains or whatever, and just say fuck it and, talk to people and try to like make myself uncomfortable, because I don't think you can like grow as a person or professionally unless you're constantly challenging yourself. So that's sort of one of my personal goals this year, and particularly for domaining this space, I want to like be more connected and not sort of just be a fly on the wall anymore, and share things if I think they're valuable, and just be there with everybody else.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you're certainly sticking to it right off the bat here, jumping into the space today. So I'm glad you shared. And I mean, it's been a journey for me as well over the past year, becoming really like the face of Unstoppable on X. It requires me to put out thought pieces and take risks and get up on stage here and talk week in and week out. And I have, the same things go through my mind. It's like, oh, am I saying the right thing? Do I sound stupid? Like blah, blah, blah. But hey, the more risks you take, the more comfortable you get taking risks, and it all compounds in every area of life. So on that note, guys, get out there and take some risks. Happy New Year to all of you, and we will catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you.